Video games are the biggest form of entertainment on the planet. A third of the world's 7.5 billion people play them, pumping billions of dollars into the industry every year. But veteran gamers fear that gaming is changing for the worse, and much of gaming's history could be lost for good. The gaming industry has started to phase out physical video games. With digital downloads, those mandatory and endless terms and conditions mean real ownership is never guaranteed. Digital content can and will be lost forever if servers go down for good. And Google just announced their first video game console, the Stadia, which will be an all-digital platform. For Andrew Borman, a game preservationist from Rochester's Museum of Play, it's an absolute nightmare.
So I think there's an element of this is our culture. You know, games are, we say that games are probably the most predominant form of play. Electronic games are the most prominent form of play in the 21st century. So they're clearly important.
Borman is interested in preserving as much as he can, but preserving games and making them readily available can be tough. For one, you need the actual game cartridge, and the internal mechanisms of that cartridge still need to work. Most retro systems only support the games that were made for them at a specific time. If you don't have a particular device to play on, it's practically impossible to play.
You can find an old board game in an attic somewhere and have a pretty good copy of it. With video games, that's not necessarily the case.
The most common way in which old games can be played revolves around a process known as emulation. It requires someone to dump all of a physical game's data into a program that emulates an old console as software. But distributing these games online is pretty illegal. The industry's legitimate efforts to carry over old games on modern consoles have produced mixed results.
And with physical copies, keeping them around is good because you'll have it forever.
But why are these nostalgic gamers so passionate?
I know with my PS4 personally, most of the games I've bought so far have been right on the PSN store. I haven't even dropped off, popped by GameStop. But I do like having the option.
Most people who play games have a story about a box. Something they got on the holidays or purchased with their allowance. They form a subculture who hold on to these memories and retro experiences tightly. Jason Bamondi is one of them, a collector from New Jersey who owns over 5,000 physical video games. But one game resonates with him the most, the one that started his journey into collecting.
Mike Tyson's Punch-Out is my favorite game of all time. My father was a boxer, and that was the only video game he ever played in his life, and it was the game we and him played together. He bought it for me for Christmas in '88. Now, I don't want to get too personal, but I lost my dad this year, so this actually took on even more, meaning for me.
When it comes to a choice between digital games and physical ones, Jason knows where his heart is.
I have things in this room that I actually owned from childhood. They still work, and at least I have the ability and the choice to keep them maintained if I'd like to. When I bought a game as a young kid, I bought it 100%. Whether it was a good game or a bad game, it was a complete game. Now you have instances where you have 6% of the information on a disk and then the rest is all online on servers, and I just think that's pretty bad in the long run for consumers.
Mike Bird is the owner of Video Game Trading Post in Massapequa, New York, a store filled to the brim with literally thousands of games. Bird and his staff fix video game hardware, clean gaming cartridges and discs, and buy and sell used games to keep them in circulation.
We're glorified recyclers at this point because this is all obsolete garbage to 90% of the population, and then to a person like me and you, this is gold. This is your childhood, and people are just throwing it out.
Bird is sometimes surprised by customers who search for some really peculiar titles that became hits around the time they released, but are very hard to acquire today in some cases.
Do you know how many people ask me for SpongeBob Battle for Bikini Bottom? I'm like, why is it $20? I don't know, but I mean, people like that, they want that. So to preserve that, little piece, it gives me instant gratification when I can bring a game back to life and then sell it a minute later.
Bird's longtime customers really grow attached to his shop.
I can't even come up with the words to describe how I feel about the store, so that's pretty much that in a nutshell.
To meet a growing demand, the company Limited Run Games, among others, is creating quote-unquote limited run physical releases of popular digital titles.
So it's important that these games are preserved. I think it's a lot more fun to play it on the original hardware than to pirate something. And as a collector, it's really cool to, like, if you're a big fan of a series, to show your pride and have it behind you.
While Bogart says he is resigned to an all-digital future, he's not worried about the near-term future of his company.
I think there'll always be an audience that wants to just collect things. I think worst case scenario, there'll always be something we can do that appeals to the fans and collectors.
While these gamers aren't necessarily worried about whether or not we'll be able to play Super Mario Bros. In 20 years, they are worried that many smaller titles, some popular at the time and some not, will be lost to history. What will come next though? The future is still uncertain for many of these endangered games.